Gonzalez.
Yeah, Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. Another one that I'm familiar with. There's a couple I was touching on real briefly. One's Warren versus DC, and this was two women were living. They had a few ladies who lived in a house in DC. Two women were upstairs. They heard their third roommate downstairs being assaulted, crying for help, and by multiple intruders. They called the police, not once but multiple times. They were told that police were on their way. A short time later, they heard their roommate scream stop. They assumed the police had got there. They went downstairs and found out that the police hadn't shown up. In fact, that the intruders were still there. And for the next 14 hours, they were raped and brutalized and forced to commit sexual acts on each other, all these other things. And the ladies then sued, saying, "Hey, you guys said you were showing up," and da da da. And the court personnel said that they owe no duty to the victims and aren't liable for failure to provide adequate police protection, because they have a duty to the general public, not an individual. So if you think about the perverse incentives that this allows for, I know if I went to say like a screen printer and I said, "Hey, here's $1,000 for a big batch of shirts," and they didn't deliver it, I'd be like, "Hey, we have an issue. We made a contract." But today, police, they say, "Everyone who lives in this area, we're going to steal your money to protect you," but we really don't have an obligation to protect you. So there's no way this system is ever going to be bring about its desired, its stated ends, which are, and its well intended, its goals, which I agree are worthwhile, protection and safety. There's no way that an institution based at its core on theft can ever bring that about, because it's flawed from the foundation. Another instance I want to mention about this no duty protect happened last year. Some of y'all may have been familiar with it. Got this guy named Maxim Gelman. He was kind of scorned by his lover. She didn't want to continue associating with him, so he ended up getting into an argument with his own mom's partner, killing him, going to the girl's house, killing her mom, waiting for her, killing her when she fled in a vehicle, carjacked another guy, stabbed him. Then this was a 28-hour long ordeal. He was on the New York Metro, and he was trying to bang and get into the conductor's booth, and a ticket salesman from the Lincoln Center there, this guy named Joe Lozado, saw what was going on, and he tried to intervene a little bit. He got attacked. He got stabbed 7 times by this guy in his efforts to sort of bring him under control. Eventually, he was successful. And then what happens? Out of the train conductor's booth come 2 New York police employees. And so Joe Lozado he said, when it was explained to me they chose to stay in the motorroom compartment instead of coming out, I was very upset. You would think, hey, these guys have take a salary to protect us, but instead they looked after themselves instead of the well-beings of these other people who if you contract with somebody, you think you'd have an obligation for them to act on that. So anyway, Lozado sued, but the courts have said thus far that the police had no special duty to protect him or any individual on the train, because the cops put the public safety of all ahead of one's individual rights. So, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. But so again, we gotta get back. I mean, we could if you look at CopBlock or any number of these other sites, unfortunately there's not a lack of anecdotal examples about how police employees don't really provide this stated good of protection as they purport to. But I would, like Carla touched on, it shouldn't be an us versus them. We shouldn't, some people get involved with CopBlock, they might say fuck the police or all cops are bastards. But I say, hey, I can understand why you might have that mindset, but that's not going to bring about a desirable conclusion. That's only going to exacerbate this us versus them or perpetuate this gulf for these barriers that supposedly exist. So I would encourage us instead to think about, a lot of these folks who go into policing, they do so with good intentions. They might have, since they were a kid, said, I want to be a cop, and everyone's like, oh, that's good for you, Johnny, or maybe their dad or whoever was a cop. So they might go into it with good intentions, and only then, when they get into the environment, realize sort of the perverse incentives again in this institution. So I would encourage you, if you do have interaction with the police, and it's not obviously a hostile one that you're on the spot right then, but to just try to share ideas with them and outline this situation to them. And we've made a Welcome Leos page on CopBlock a couple months ago, and it's something that I often point police employees to check out, because I think there's a good bit of resources on there. But The other thing, I guess, with the police